Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Sit Down with Shibby. Today I am joined by Mr. Rafael Ruiz, aka the most handsome Apex caster, aka Mr. Steal Your Girl, but most commonly and famously known as Dia. Dia, how are you, man?
I'm doing really well. I didn't know where we were going with that intro, so I was like, okay, yeah, cool. I'm getting hyped out. This is good. Yeah. So I'm feeling pretty good after the intro. I can't lie.
That's the icebreaker right there, right? Any nerves, anything like that? The guests hear the intro and they're like, man, this guy's really nice. So basic starter question everybody needs to know for people that don't actually know who Rafael DiA Ruiz is. Who are you? What do you do? Give me a breakdown.
I'd say that I'm professionally most well known for my work in the Apex Legends Global Series, where I'm currently doing their professional league. I've covered their challenger circuits for a long time, and for my work in Brazilian League of Legends, I do a lot of work for them running the CBLOL English broadcast. It is an unofficial broadcast, so asterisk there, of course, but passion project entirely. And those are the two titles that I mostly do. I'm associated with Steel Series a little bit. I host for them pretty consistently. I'm wearing their stuff right now. Not sponsored, but kind of sponsored because I work for them all the time. And they're lovely people. So yeah, those are the three places that I think most people will have seen me.
Nice plug there at the end. That's like that's a dream sponsor, right? If anybody else wants to.
Straight to them.
Yeah. Pretty soon you'll get the Red Bull fridge in the back, everything like that. I do want to talk about the CBLOL broadcast before we get all into the Apex stuff. Before we talk about that, I do want to talk about that unofficial broadcast because that was something that was running for about 2 years up until the announcement of the official English broadcast brought by CBLOL. I do want to kind of dive into the idea of it actually coming together. How did it end up happening? What was the reason for you specifically to start that unofficial broadcast? As there's a bunch of regions that don't have English. So what was the allure of CBLOL?
Yeah, a big part of it, because this started a long time ago. Before I even started commentating, I was one of those people that watched a lot of LCK, LEC, anything that I really could. I dabbled in LPL, whether it was English broadcast or not, just because I wanted to get an idea of the global League of Legends scene. And CBLOL actually lined up in a perfect time slot for me in the morning. So it was another League of Legends broadcast that I could observe, have on, and just learn more about the global approach to League of Legends. Once I started casting, it made sense to be able to cover a minor region because for those of you who maybe are interested in beginning to cast it at any level, a lot of the work that you do is for one-off events or for events where people's rosters are changing a lot. And as a developing commentator, it was important to me, along with the people that I wanted to work with, to be able to develop a skill set to tell a story over the course of a split and understand how to weave those narratives at the highest level. And so I started CBLOL English. I'm fortunate enough to have a partner who is from Brazil, so a lot of translation work was really easy, and it's taken off from there. It was a big passion project for us, and as soon as I recognized how much I was improving over the course of that split and being able to tell stories, I wanted to bring other amazing people on to tell those stories, and it's grown into what it is today. And as you said, being acquired, or rather being acquired, the idea is being acquired, taken over by the actual CBLOL broadcast. So we'll see where it goes. We've been in contact with Riot, and yeah, we'll see.
Kind of leads into my next question. Would you actually recommend up and coming casters or in that nature for any game, not just League, to like take a region that's maybe underrepresented or undeserved in regards to an English broadcast and just like start one yourself? Is that something that you would, now that you've done the process from start to finish, right? Because there's a lot of people that are like, yeah, never do a startup. Like I made like, don't do that, right? Or actually don't go into esports right out of high school, that kind of stuff. Now that you've kind of been in the process for a couple of years, you've done the heavy lifting, would you actually recommend that to somebody, or would you more recommend someone to join an established, maybe unofficial English broadcast? Is there a different weight to those?
Yeah, I think if you're joining something established, you're already doing a really good job. Especially if it is one of those unofficial broadcast, whatever English coverage. As long as you're providing additional value to a region, you're doing well, and it doesn't matter whether you start it yourself or not. But if you are going to start it yourself, I implore people to make sure that you have the time now and that you're not burning yourself out and that you will have the time in the future. Because one of the things with CBLOL is, as I've had less and less time as my career has continued to grow, is acquiring production staff and oftentimes having to do it myself in order to make the broadcast run. And the biggest service you can do to a region is provide them with an additional audience, is bring them to, say, the English speaking world, whatever language you want to cover it in. But the biggest disservice you can do is have that disappear. And so if you are going to jump into it as a founder, make sure that you're in it for the long haul. You're in it till it gets till the region starts to pick it up themselves and do their own broadcasts, because you don't want that audience to be left with nothing now, you know?
Sound advice. Don't leave your fans hanging. I would 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that obviously more people are probably familiar with your Apex casting, and it seems like you've made a pretty concerted effort to kind of veer that way. I wouldn't say you've switched completely, but
Mhm.
what was maybe the turning point for you personally to say like, hey, the switch turned on, like, I want to do more Apex Legends casting. I know there's a lot of people that originally start out as League casters. They'll branch off to different games and then they'll just go to those different games due to
Yeah.
most of the time like an not overexposure, just like a huge amount of League casters. There's so many, right? The amateur scene
Yeah.
is saturated a little bit. Do you think was that one of the reasons, or was there a multitude of reasons for you to kind of make the concerted push? Like, maybe it was 50-50 back then, but now I would say it's maybe like what, 75-25, 75 Apex, 25% League of Legends. I don't know if that's an
Yeah.
unfair split. I don't want to
No,
categorize it that way.
I think you could probably go further, honestly. Like, I do CBLOL, but that is the league that I do for the most part. And the switch was, or not the switch, the redirect was something that was a long time coming, because I also, pre actually beginning to cast, was playing a lot of Apex Legends and went, wow, this would be an amazing esport. I wanted to commentate it, much like I wanted to commentate League of Legends, but I just never had the time. Pandemic changed a lot. And and so as my league career started developing, ALGS Year 2 was announced, and that was where EA took this big step forward and really laid out a format for the upcoming season. I knew I wanted to be involved in that, and there were more opportunities starting to creep up in the Apex scene, so it was a early jump in thing where I knew that I now had the fundamentals from League of Legends to be able to create a good broadcast and bring that skill set over to Apex Legends. And so that is something that I actually credit a lot of the league scene for, is that there is, as you say, so much saturation, but with that saturation also comes a big emphasis on how to fundamentally build a broadcast up well, and what your role is and how to recognize that and how to tell a story. Those skills are necessary to succeed even a little bit in League of Legends. And so making the move into Apex, I brought a lot of those skills with me, and given the timing, given the skills that I had via League of Legends, given basically a lot of lucky factors, that took off pretty well. Um, yeah, as a result, it was a little complicated because with the amateur broadcasts in League of Legends, as I increasingly picked up work in Apex, they were being pushed in a direction where most talent should be unique to League of Legends. So I unfortunately had to part ways with a lot of those opportunities, but I've kept myself in the league scene via CBLOL because I'm really passionate about both games.
You mentioned obviously the casting in Apex and dedicating more time to it. League of Legends has a lot harder defined color caster play by play roles. Would you
Mhm.
say that's similar for Apex, that for people that are unfamiliar, or do you do like a mix of both? Because when I see you guys on broadcast, sometimes you're doing the color and sometimes the other guy's doing the play by play and vice versa. Is it just like more of a tossing back and forth?
Yeah, it is. And Apex is a little bit more flexible in that way because we don't always have minimap up, unlike in League of Legends where you can see a play coming and it's very easy to say, all right, this is exactly the pacing, and here you go, play by play. In Apex Legends, there are 20 teams doing God knows what the entire time, and suddenly you cut in and you're halfway through a fight, and it's necessary for the color to be able to pick that up so that it's not very stilted broadcast. There's flexibility there for sure. However, as Apex is continuing to evolve, those roles are becoming more separate because the game is starting to be solved a little more. I started out as a pure play by play in Apex Legends, and I'd consider myself a flex commentator, if not leaning a bit towards color now, just because of my time spent in the scene and the amount that you know about Apex Legends after having spent that time. So the roles are becoming more defined, and I am leaning a bit harder towards color in Apex Legends at the moment, though I'm very capable of doing both as my career started in play by play.
Yeah. Love the way you used evolved, because that was actually gonna go into my next question. So Apex, by the way, Dia, was released 4 years ago now, 2019. Wild, right? It's been a good couple years, and there seems to be, a very big divide, right? As the game's evolved, of like the casual Apex player and the competitive Apex player. Can you specifically talk to why Apex has such that big divide? I know like there's other games too. I would say Overwatch is a pretty big example, but it seems like with League, that audience really kind of blends both together. Whereas for Apex, at least from the stuff I like see online, right? Twitter, Reddit, right? Competitive Apex versus the separate Apex Legends subreddit, all this kind of stuff. There seems to be like a very big divide in the audience. Do you think that's just kind of how the game is, unfortunately, because it's a battle royale? Or do you think the developers, maybe Respawn, are shifting and doing patches towards the other every now and then? Like, what would you attribute? It doesn't have to be one thing, but it can be multiple things, right? What would you attribute that big divide to?
Yeah, if I had to put a name on it, I'd say that the largest factor in this divide of casual player who doesn't know anything about competitive versus pure compet is that there just hasn't been enough time in the esport. It's only 4 years old, which seems like a lot. It's enough for a child to start speaking in full sentences, but it isn't really any amount of time for the esports scene to evolve. And EA and Respawn have actually done a really good job of setting up this ALGS year format in order to bring more structure to the competitive scene. It's a slow process, and one that is also going to be assisted not just by time, but by the ranked system and its continual tweaking. I know that in the upcoming patch that we have, we're going to be making some changes to the ranked system. And one of the things about League of Legends that makes it very easy to translate between the competitive viewer and the person who's never watched it before is that the game plays out more or less the same. Your objective is always just to destroy the enemy nexus. And there's a meta that's been established over the past little while that even a casual player is going to follow. Support, ADC, jungle, mid, etc. There aren't a lot of people playing Taric mid, for example. That just doesn't happen. But when we jump into Apex Legends, there's a lot of strategies you can take. There's massive variability in the game, and the points system and stakes from a competitive level don't necessarily match up with those in the ranked system. And that's always going to be true to an extent, but that's also something that EA and Respawn are refining over time to bring these scenes more in line, because the more the game flourishes, the more the esport flourishes, the more the esport flourishes, the more the game flourishes. And I think they know that.
I do want to talk about kind of the visual clarity of the game, right? I think that's been kind of like one of the bigger criticisms, right? Overwatch as well. Like I've been through like a lot of different esports. Overwatch has also had that kind of critique where it's like there's just too much going on. Like you said, there's 20 teams in Apex, so much going on. Do you think that's one of the reasons that could be holding it back, just fundamentally? Like if there's just the spectating is not as over the top clean. Like I can see a POV of like a CSGO character, right? And it's like, okay, this guy has gun, this guy plants the bomb, he shoots, he kills, right? League of Legends, top down view for most of the part. You can see kind of what's relatively going on the map. But like with Apex, there's like 5 different things going on. And if 2 teams are pushing into like a Gibby bubble, then you're going like, boom, here's this POV, there's this POV coming in from the top, and then you also have to get the Gibby's team POV. You're switching back and forth. Credit to your guys as spectators for ALGS. They are fucking fantastic. Like for someone like me, obviously I'm not as a casual person. Like I understand what's going on because I've played the games and everything. Credit to them. They do like a fantastic fucking job, but it feels like you can only push it so much before it's like, hey, we have like a very big clarity issue. Is that just something that Apex is going to have to deal with? I know the spectating has gotten better over the years, but it's just like, it feels like there's a lot of visual clutter in the game.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, right? Like when you're introducing, and I would even toss the same thing towards League of Legends, right? When you're in team fights, there are a lot of lights going on at
Yes.
the same time. Whenever you have a game, especially with abilities, you add in grenades to that, where everything is being piled into one crucial fight, there's going to be a lot of confusion. And I don't think that that's ever going to be fully solved, because if you can look at it and the casual viewer can look at something and go, I know everything, then there's the game's too simple.
Yeah. Agreed.
There needs to be a lot of nuance. There needs to be a lot of things going on. And to the credit of those behind the Apex scene at both a casual and competitive level, there's been a big increase in the readability during esports broadcasts from both the observers and the commentators, and even the players in their understanding of how to execute fights, how to show fights, and what sections of fights are most important to talk about. So it's a slow process. At some level, the visual clutter that you talk about is something that'll have to be sorted out on the development side, whether it's reducing some of the things that crop up in your field of view or minimizing them in order to sort of maximize what's most important. But that's all back end stuff. And I think that it's also relatively minimal versus the understanding of commentators and observers and players to create clear narratives and clean fights where they can. And that's definitely improving. I don't know if I answered the question now because I sort of monologued, but
No, you're
think
fine.
I
You're
did.
fine. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I think that's fine if you monologue. The long-winded answers are perfect here, Dia. I do want to talk about kind of the evolution of what Apex was as well, right? When it
Yeah.
first launched in 2019, a lot of the BR streamers came on, and it was a very Twitch-heavy game. And then the competitive scene started to form, right? Where before, I guess it was kind of a joke, right? People would look like Fortnite BR. Oh, that didn't work, the competitive scene. But it seems like Respawn and EA as a whole have really been able to flesh out the competitive scene.
Mhm.
Is that just due to the fact, obviously on their end, but is that due to the fact that you guys just have like such a community that is unwilling to let this die almost, right? Like they're just like, no, we're going to keep pushing forward. This is a competitive game. And over the years, the skill expression, the strategies, right? Rotations, how comps work, right? What is the most effective comp on certain maps like World's Edge versus like King's Canyon versus like all the other maps, right? Like there's so many different ones.
Mhm.
Do you think that's due to part of the community just pushing this competitive scene and keeping it alive so much?
Yes, yes. And actually, in large part, the community is making sure that this scene continues to flourish and has pushed it to where it is today. A big part of this is also just happening at home base at EA/Respawn. There's a lot of commitment from the team specifically at Respawn, because I've gotten the chance to speak to a lot of them ab- about how to make this an esport that does feel good to play, good to watch, great to experience no matter your level. And there's a lot of passion there. So it's the community, and it's the community that also exists via the actual developer side, which is a really interesting thing to watch, because one of the things that we have at this point, we're in like 2023, that's the year that we're in, I got it right. Um is that people know what esports are, and people have been watching them for a really long time, whether it's in Apex Legends or not. And so when you form a team, say for example, like you have at Respawn, there are people that just want to see it become a really successful esport and want to see it become the best that it can. So that community of esports and of watching something competitively and wanting to understand the game at the most perfect level has definitely bled into every aspect of game development, and we're seeing it lift up this scene both casually and professionally, over here at Apex.
So I did want to talk about the more nuanced stuff of Apex, right? I would say the kind of one of the big things is that it has a very unusually long patch cycle for the game. Specifically in regards to other competitive scenes, like League obviously has it like every 2 weeks, which is kind of crazy. I think they've kind of set their own standard. Overwatch has like a one cycle, and then it kind of adjusts as it goes with big like mid-season patches. Do you think specifically for Apex, the patch cycle benefits the competitive scene, or have you seen more pushback on like a hey, can we get a faster patch cycle because certain metas are more standard, right? Like I think I remember when I was watching a couple of years ago, there was a very big emphasis on like the Gibraltar or Gibby, the Watson Wraith meta, right? That was like one of the really big ones. Call it a safety. Obviously, the rotations. Obviously, they adjusted Watson. Then when Valkyrie came out, you had a sort of different meta. Then you had the Revtane stuff going on. There's a lot of different stuff, but it feels like for an extended period of time, certain compositions and team comps just work best. What side are you on specifically? And that's the first question. But also, do you think the competitive patch cycle unique to Apex is actually does it more benefit than harm?
My answer has changed over time. But you talk about the, Watson Wraith meta, and I think back to Gibby Bloodhound Octane as well.
Yeah.
And those stuck around for a very long time because there weren't a whole lot of options and there wasn't anything that did what they do better. And there was no answer to them, there was no counter. As the roster of Apex Legends expands, and as the players understand the game more, because again, we are still in the evolution that I talked about earlier, where even players, even coaches, are learning how to maximize what it means to play Apex Legends and solving the game. As we approach that, and as the Legend roster grows, longer patch cycles become better to deal with and arguably are better for the game and its players because they give you a chance to innovate. I'm going to give an example that everybody will recognize if you've been watching the games over the past month. When we started this season, everybody and their mother was running Catalyst Seer Valkyrie. Didn't change at all. It was just like that Octane Gibby Blood meta where this was just the best thing. And nothing's really changed. But now people are starting to run Rampart. We saw a team in Challenger Circuit just yesterday. That's the tier 2 scene in Apex Legends. Pick up a win running no Seer. That's no wall hacks on their entire team. And so these longer patch cycles that Apex Legends gives us, well, at the initial, starting point, you might start playing something and go, well, this feels oppressive. It feels like there's one answer. Giving us time to figure it out and giving the players time to figure out how these different legends play a very complex game of rock, paper, scissors with each other is, I think, good for the game, viewers, players, etc. Because it makes the game more complex than, oh, what's strongest on this patch? I'll play this for the next 2 weeks and then change. It's about understanding the game, and that's what we're seeing more of in the competitive scene.
I would probably say that's a pretty solid answer, right? Because I think another game that has like a pretty unusually long patch cycle, or a game. Sometimes there's games that just don't get patched. In this case, StarCraft, right, was one that was like really notorious for not having a patch cycle. But then eventually, over time, after like you said, years, right? Like in regards to esports and the competitive scene, Apex is still fairly young. StarCraft had like 10, 15 years for them people to figure out like counters to specific, like Zerg and all that kind of stuff, right? Like there's a lot more. And like I think credit to your point, there are more legends in this case being revealed that do different things and also counter certain things, right? Yeah, the Catalyst Seer meta is pretty crazy. Seer came out almost, I think, more than a year ago now, I believe.
Yeah. And Seer wasn't meta when he started. Rather, he was meta when he first launched because his Q did damage, and that was crazy. But
and it interrupted bats. It did everything. It literally did everything.
It flashbanged you. But then like they nerfed him. They took away all the crazy stuff about his Q and made it just what it was meant to be on release. And nobody played him for months, and then people started playing him. Then he became meta without any real changes to the legend itself. He's actually even been nerfed and stayed meta, and it's because of these niche things that the legends apply to the game, be it something like Maggie that becomes even more powerful when there are Gibraltars in the game, or something like Seer that nobody looks at for a very long time, that thinks of as an inferior Bloodhound, and then gets picked up. And it gives us more of some of my favorite moments in gaming, because if I can refer this back to a League of Legends example, I think it was T1 at Worlds pulling out MF Zyra. Do you remember that?
Yeah, against or I think it was the other way around. Rocks, Tigers, Prey, and Gorilla
Rocks
may have.
Tigers.
Yeah. Or Ash, and then there was the Ash. There was MF Ash, and then like you said, Zyra as well. MF Zyra. There's another one. There's been like a bunch of different stuff, right?
Yeah.
And you're saying we got that because of the pretty much no patch of Worlds, right? There really isn't.
Yes.
It's like you're on the patch for like a month, I believe, pretty much, or
yeah, and so
weeks.
because at that time we had this one bot lane meta that was so amazing, when people pulled out a new strat, new champions on the world stage and took it to a win, that was one of the best moments in League of Legends history. And now being able to see that replicated in ways because of the longer patch cycle is really nice on a more regular basis, because it gives us time to appreciate players and coaches for what they actually do, which is understand the game at the highest level.
In an ideal world, right? Every legend would be viable. Obviously, that's not the case. I feel like there have been some legends where they just haven't been seen a lot lately, right? Like my example would be like Vantage, right? Pathfinder, these kinds of legends. In your view, should Apex strive to have every legend viable? Or in the case of a lot of other games, these champions get the spotlight because we feel like they've been underpowered, they're underplayed, they have a low win rate, yada, 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 and they should get their shot in the spotlight now versus other legends. Like, obviously, that's a very, very fine balancing act. I don't think it's possible for any developer to do that. But do you think that Apex Legends should strive to come to an strive to go to more of a, we're going to try to make every legend viable, or hey, these are the legends we're buffing because we don't see them get played a lot. If they do get buffed in the meta, that's good. If they push stuff out, that's fine. Like, where do you kind of fall in this regard?
I think that I will answer that question by sidestepping a little bit.
It's fine.
My ideal for Apex Legends is that every legend has one thing that they do really well. Like they're like a tool. And they have one thing that you'd use them for, and it would be weird to use them for anything else. I'll take your Vantage example. Vantage has some things about her kit that are making her rough to play right now. But in large part, she's a great recon character because she gives you that information on shields. And I'm not going to get too far into the specifics, but specifically her ultimate that a lot of people value highly about Vantage, most highly in fact, has a really good niche use. You don't have to carry a sniper. It's great for keeping people from peeking angles, because if you peek after you've been marked by Vantage, you're trolling. And it's got a niche use. That niche isn't useful in competitive, but it just isn't useful in competitive right now. And that's always going to be the reality. Some things will never really see the light of competitive sunshine because competitive meta favors a different style of game. But as that continues to change, as it so often has, going from pre-rally to post-rally Apex Legends, where we had bunker style to run it everyone style, and now we're going back to somewhere in the middle, the style of game that you get at the highest level is always changing based on what's good and what counters what's good, and following that wave. So every legend can have their time in the sun as long as they're good at one thing, and that's my ideal design philosophy.
For newer people, I guess, getting into the scene and understanding the Apex Legends, right? If they're coming from like more of a casual perspective, they played it with their friends and stuff. I would say there's something kind of unique is where teams will have like designated POIs to drop on. Can you kind of commentate like why that is a little bit? Because from somebody that's coming in from the casual side, oh, I'm just going to drop here, and if we win this POI or this point of interest for people, we should be able to have all the loot. Whereas like a lot of teams you'll see, whether it's like a gentleman's agreement, but I've also seen stuff online where like other teams will get very mad when like you dropped on my POI, you piece of shit. Like what? Like you're trolling, you're griefing.
Oh, we can swear on this podcast. Okay.
Yeah, of course, 100%. No. First 10 minutes, you're not allowed to. After that, you go as much as you like, because YouTube is weird like that. YouTube's very weird like that.
Okay.
First 10 minutes. But yeah, like straight up. Like I've seen it online. I'm somewhat familiar with the Apex Legends. I've been a little bit removed now for a bit, but that was like a big thing. And I think for a casual audience, that connect or that disconnect is like, well, I drop anywhere I can. Like, why? You know, like it's not a 1-to-1. It's like these guys are dropping here, they're here, they're here, they're here. Can you kind of shed some light and explain why that is, just holistically?
Yeah. A big part of that disconnect is always going to exist because as a casual player, if you drop somewhere, say you drop fragment because everybody does, and you lose, you're in game again. Like you just hit, oh, requeue, that's easy. It's less than 30 seconds of your life if you really did die that quickly. But at the competitive level, you have a set amount of games and not a set amount of time to accumulate as many points as possible. And so every game matters so much more. And as a result, it's that much more important to make sure that you're not contesting. So even if we made it completely illegal for teams to actually communicate with each other pre-game and know where everybody else was dropping, and they didn't know who was in the lobby with them, you'd see contests for the first couple games, and then everybody would try and scatter for the most part. The only reason that people contest POIs is for the metagame, is for saying, well, we're willing to stay at this POI and make you maybe have a 0-point game, maybe end your tournament chances, so you should go somewhere else. That's why teams will stay there, because they want to hold on to POIs over multiple tournaments. But in the short form, in the course of 6 games or 12 games, whatever it may be, it is always better to mitigate the RNG in Apex as much as you can, because that's what a battle royale is all about. And by landing somewhere, even if you know it's a worse place to land, and making sure you don't have a 0-point game, you're already mitigating the randomness that other teams can introduce into your game. So does that answer the question?
I would say that's a pretty fair answer, right? It's just making sure that like it's I guess the best way to describe it would be like it's a very high risk, low reward thing, because it's like, yeah, you get the POI, but now you're down resources, right? You may have had to burn 2 batteries or 3 cells or ammo and stuff like that. And when it comes down to actually rotating, when it comes to the mid game of Apex, those things matter. How many shield cells do you have? How many batteries do you have? How much ammo are you carrying? What kind of guns do you have? How are you going to play it, right? Are you like a PK SMG? Do you have somebody that has like a charge rifle or something like that? Right? There's a lot of different stuff like that. Go on.
And consider as well that Apex Legends is almost never about just 2 teams. It isn't like League where it's just 5v5. When you're dropping into a POI and you're contesting, that contest is going to mean that you have less resources and you waste more time having those fewer resources. So the longer the fight goes on, the better that each team plays, the more chance that somebody else comes in and kills all of you. And so there is very frequently a world where you're contesting and there is no winner. So why do it? You know, like the zero-sum game is not what I'm looking for, but it feels right because the word zero is there. It's not necessarily a good thing for either team, win or lose.
In regards to the competitive scene, right? I feel like, as you mentioned, POIs are uncontested. Do you actually think that's a detriment for players to get really good practice in? Because the ranked ladder, if anybody's played it, obviously you've played it. Yeah, I've played it. People are madmen. They will contest you on PO. They'll contest you for a building, not even near the PO. Like they're crazy, right? And so if you're somebody that is a competitive Apex player, just use a famous player's example, TSM Hal or Reps or whoever, right? Nice wig. They can't get practice in, and they're going, hey, like they would be like, hey, my competitive experience does not mirror the ranked ladder. I can't get solid practice in. Do you actually think that's a problem? And if so, how do you think the competitive scene has been able to circumvent that issue? Obviously, scrims play a big part, but like, is there anything else to it?
I was actually going to say scrims. Scrims is a big part of practicing the pieces of competitive that are the most challenging. If you're jumping into a ranked game, especially with the way that the current ranked system is set up, because it's all about incentives in ranked, you're incentivized to have these higher variance games right now. But as that continues to evolve, ranked will never truly mirror competitive, I don't imagine, but it can get closer. The way that you solve this problem of practicing your rotations, understanding macro strategy at a competitive level is scrims and is intentional scrims, because even at the scrim level, and we've seen this in every region so far, it's actually been a big point of conversation recently. Players will try and limit test a little bit more. They'll try and take that ranked mentality in and play very aggressive. And that is what ranked is really good for. If you are a high rank player and you're jumping into a high rank game and people are contesting, you're still getting a lot of value because you're fighting against people who are perhaps just as good as they would be in a professional league in a situation that you'll probably find yourself in. No matter how well you play in pro play, at some point, you're going to have to find your way out of a 1v2. You're going to have to do something crazy in order to survive. And that's what ranked is really good for right now. That's what really any level of Apex is good for. When you're talking about rotations, macro strategy, that's where scrims come in. And we needed delineation between scrims that are purely for macro strategy and working out how something would go versus for contesting against other teams and for trying to find POIs and for limit testing your own squad and their new composition that you're trying out. That's the direction that it seems that we're going in, and it's a difficult one to navigate because players have limited time, limited attention, and also need to invest in other areas of their life to meet their needs, because you want to play competitive, you also want to have a social life, and you probably also want to stream and do YouTube content to really maximize what you're getting in a competitive scene that is so driven by being able to watch different perspectives to understand the game. So, long answer, it'll happen. Short answer, I agree with you. There are solutions that we haven't implemented yet.
Yeah, the all important question is coming up. I think you know it was going to be asked, and I think you have a little bit more of a forum to kind of discuss it. It is the most contentious question that is always asked. I guarantee you've probably been asked it a million times by people, but I do want to hear your more long form, thought out answer. It is
What is it?
Apex, uniquely to the competitive scene, both allows controller players and mouse and keyboard players to compete in the same tournaments. Now, obviously, very high contention point for other games. I believe Rainbow Six Siege, a game similar that had both scenes, they separated the competition and then they would eventually brought it together. Overwatch has never been like that. There's a couple other games that kind of separate it. Where do you stand, and what is your more in-depth answer on in regards to not necessarily like, does controller have the advantage, does mouse and keyboard have the advantage, there's pros and cons, benefits, and all that kind of stuff, but where do you kind of stand on the integration? And being that it's fairly unique to Apex, do you think overall it was just a better decision, or would you may have wanted to see it separated out the competition? Do you believe there is a staunch difference?
I like the way that it is right now because integration is better, I believe, for the viewer of any level. And it also brings up really important conversations about how both of those inputs function in a competitive environment. There are always differences, as you said, pros and cons to each, but much like the legends that come and go with meta, so do things like controller MNK, albeit slightly more slowly. And we're seeing that explored quite a bit in the competitive Apex scene, especially over the course of the past couple of years, where MNK players have had a sort of winter going on with them. There are less MNK players, there are more controller players. Controller players do more damage on average. However, I think that the integration is important, not just from the perspective of solving the game and being able to do that in an environment where, yes, we're assuming integration, but because it brings the community closer together to the competitive scene, which is something that we talked about earlier. I want to be able to, if I'm sitting on my PlayStation, Xbox, whatever you're playing on, I want to be able to tune into a competitive Apex Legends game to watch the ALGS and go, I can do that. I can do that right now, because that's what makes esports so amazing, is the ability for somebody to watch it and feel like they can replicate it. They watch, you called them out earlier. They watch Hal pop off and they go, I'm going to go jump on Wraith and I'm going to do that, or whatever it is. And that's what makes esports so amazing. It's what makes it such a great investment for publishers as well. And keeping it integrated is a good step for Apex Legends, because it makes the game and the esport specifically more accessible in both directions.
Speaking, I guess, of the esport and talking more about teams, right? You guys have had probably one of the most dominant players, I would say, in Apex in Hal. Can you explain, obviously from the kind of an outsider's perspective looking in, right? Like I've said he's like low key the Faker of Apex, right? Like that's what I think of him as, right? Or that's what comparisons we made. He's just been very, very dominant. What to you specifically can you attribute to him, and not just him, because obviously it's a team game, but him and his team's dominance within the Apex scene for so long? Like what, if you were to say, like, what do you think he does just so exceptionally well above all else consistently, right? Like I obviously say, oh, he just aims better, or he just does this, he does that. But like from your perspective, Dia, what do you think he does so well for him to just stay so dominant for so long?
Yeah, I think that what's brought Hal reps TSM to the forefront of Apex, to the point that we are considering them at this point in the esport on the level of a T1, or an SKT as they were, is the fact that for an esport that is very young, TSM as an organization and the individual players within it took the game very seriously as an esport from the beginning. It's very easy to mix content and esports, and we've seen it in a lot of other titles. We've seen it even in Apex Legends. But Hal and the squad, no matter what squad they've been, have always approached the game with a level of professionalism towards trying to solve it at a competitive level and not get clips for their stream necessarily, although I'm sure they generate them all the time. Very mechanically talented, very smart about the game. But what's pushed them to the level that they're at now is that desire to see it at its best competitively. And it's also what is making TSM less of a focus as the rest of the world catches up to that. And I think you can tell a similar story with Faker. Faker is the best player of all time in League of Legends. I don't know how he does at Apex, but but even with that, the gap between Faker and other mid laners, other people that play his role, has closed over the past couple of years. It hasn't closed completely. He's got a massive head start, and he's always going to be one step ahead, but it's gotten a lot closer, and I think the same is being seen for TSM as people approach the game from a pure competitive level and are looking, watching, learning, and solving Apex Legends. There's a siren. We can win. Oh,
Yeah,
it's gone. Go on.
We'll just keep it in there. Just kidding.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good answer. I would say I think that's probably one of the more defining traits of a lot of like the greatest of players, is they just day in, day out, regardless of what is new, what's meta and everything, they are coming at it with a level to improve, like a work ethic and a level to say, hey, let's get to work. We need to improve. Like it feels like they always, like, almost to an obsessive point. They are just like hungry to just be better, always better, like improving themselves. And it feels like a very common trait amongst these guys. Like it is, it's the game, and then everything else is below. And so, yeah, I would say that's that's what I was thinking. Right? It wouldn't be like oh, he does rotations better, or he plays these legends better. He just comes at it with such a tenacious ferocity to improve, I would say, and just understand the
Yeah.
game and be the best. I like that's what I looked at when I watch him, right? And when I see him, he's like, oh my god, like this guy, yeah, he's on another level.
Yeah, I don't think that, just having watched over the past couple years, I don't think that Hal instinctively even looks at the game and goes, "Oh, well, that makes total sense. This is what I have to play. This is what I have to change." But you could tell that when he doesn't understand something and it keeps killing him, God, does it infuriate him? Like he becomes obsessed with this
Yeah,
thing, and and that's what separates. It isn't this natural instinct, I think, that Hal has. It's just his inability or lack of desire to let things go and be okay with not understanding something, be okay with letting it beat him. It's not okay to beat him. That's not something that he's all right with, and so it's not going to happen consistently. That's the dream.
yeah. Um, Shifting a little bit away from the game and kind of more towards you as an
Mhm.
individual in regards to Apex casting. Um, Obviously you were grinding out the scene for quite a bit, right? I mean, if you look at your Leagueopedia, you'll see that you've done like the challenger circuit, the obviously collegiate stuff as well, right? Like it goes pretty far back, but just not too long ago, obviously you were called up, you got the call up, hey, you come cast ALGS. Yeah, right. Um, can you kind of walk me through that moment and like what that meant for you as like a on a personal note, right? Like I need to, if you get emotional, you start crying, I'm here. I can't provide you tissues, but I'm here. Was it a vindication of your like hard work and effort? Like, or were you coming in, it's like, as it should be, as expected, finally, right? Because I feel like all commentators, you have to be a little bit cocky or a little bit confident to think that like, hey, I can comment on this game. I can inform people. Was it more of an expectation for you? I know you as somebody that's like pretty humble dude. So I don't know if there's like a secret alter ego Dia that's just like mega confident. But kind of walk me
No,
through that moment.
no, I like my own commentary. I I
As you
try
should.
and commentate. Yeah, I try and commentate like I would want to hear somebody commentate, and it's a work in progress as it always is. At the point that I got invited, I did feel like I was pretty good at my job, but I also wouldn't put myself in the position where I was expecting that email to come any day. Um, there is always there are always rather things that we can't control in esports, and a big part of that is when you take the next step. And it happened to me a lot of times in my career over League of Legends, same thing in Apex Legends, even to get to the point where I was in consideration for being part of the ALGS Pro League. So receiving the email was a big release, is the word that I'm getting closest to. It was like I'd been holding my breath for a really long time and didn't know that I was, because you you keep going as a commentator, and you have to believe for your own sanity that you're good and that you're good enough and that you're improving. But you never know whether that's going to be enough to live your dream. And getting that email, which was a very funny email, um, was, yeah, really amazing, because it validated that I had been going in the right direction. It's something you have to trust but can never know. Interestingly enough, Zephyr and I, we've been commentating together a lot. We are one of the duos. Um, if you think of me, you'll think of Zephyr. If you think of Zephyr, you'll think of me. It's just we've been commentating Apex for so long. We were
Yeah.
commentating together at the time that we got the email. We were on Esports Arena back when those were broadcast, and and we were in, I think it was like week 7 or something. We had just finished game 4, and I'm like, okay, I gotta go to the bathroom between games. Zephyr does the same. And we come back and we are in shambles. We're like, oh, like I'm crying, he's crying, our producer's like, what's going on? And we're like, we can't tell you right now. It was a very crazy moment, and every step since then has still felt something that I think I'll always be dealing with. Just that little bit too far. Like at any point, there it's not going to be a thing anymore. It's all going to disappear. But it's amazing to be where I am right now. And there's something an author that I really like, Brandon Sanderson, said that I've kept with me during my time on the Pro League, being where I had wanted to be for so long. And it's, I have this opportunity right now, and I am not going to let me waste it, because if I were looking at somebody with that opportunity, um, and they weren't on top of the world and they weren't having an amazing time and they weren't putting their 100% effort into the ALGS, I would be sat there on the outside going, "What are you doing?" And so for people that aren't there and that are not yet as lucky, I want to continue making the most of what I have, because that's what the scene deserves.
I could feel the emotion in that answer. That was like a big like release for you, right? And I think that's something that a lot of commentators, amateur, any level, kind of go through, right? That big step up moment, like you said, the realization, the relief, the this was all worth it. All my hard work paid off. Um,
Mhm.
so I'm not even surprised that, like, it's funny. It's just funny to me that mid cast, or like obviously in between breaks, pop into the bathroom. Let me check my email real quick.
Oh,
Boom! The email
we
comes
were
in.
We were in shambles, Shibby. The next game, I hope I can find it, because there's no on broadcast indicator outside of the fact that we are just insane at the moment. But the next game, he's saying things, I'm saying things. I don't even know what we commentated at that point, because we got out of that game and went, I think that was our worst cast ever. And the thing is that at the time, the person who had sent us the email was also watching that broadcast, so they knew that it was so crazy. It was so crazy. I wish I cried more, because if I cried, then at least it would be like visually you understand how much it means.
I think that
I had
person knew
dramatic
what they were
childhood. I don't know.
doing.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
person knew what they were doing for sure. Hi, let me just pop this in right after this game and let me see what's up. Like that's
Yeah, yeah.
they definitely knew what they were doing. I did want to talk about the duo thing, right? Because like you
Please.
said, it's you and Zephyr, Zephyr and Dia, like you guys, like I said, um, when I was watching, right, like it would always be like you two paired up.
Yeah.
What do you think in regards to just the overall dynamic? Why do you guys think you work so well together? Because there are a lot of duos that by proxy are just duo, and it's taken them a very long time to kind of come together and really gel and really mesh. But it seems like in such a short, I say short amount of time, not that short, but
Mhm.
within a good amount of time, right? You guys have been able to really come together as a duo, right? Obviously, you guys, one of your most viral clips is you singing during one of the broadcasts, right? Like all these moments. That doesn't come just by grinding out sessions together. That comes from like a deep, I would say, like connection to your duo and like understanding who they are. Why do you, from your perspective, believe you two work so well together?
Because we both have our own howls, our little baby howls inside of us that refuse to give up on certain things. Uh, for Zephyr, and I'm speaking from an outside perspective, but for Zephyr, he refuses to not be seen. We talked about this earlier. I can fade into the background. I am a quieter person who likes to say, "Oh no, that's fine. It was all good." Um, Zephyr refuses to not be seen, and it is one of the biggest credits to him that he's able to continue pushing for himself, advocating for himself and others, um, and that pushes him even on broadcast to bring a lot of personality in, and to have it be in your face that it's Zephyr casting this game, and by God, it's incredible. And my own personal Hal is, I I refuse to stop improving at storytelling, at integration of a lot of different lines, figuring out what our energy flow is over the course of the broadcast, refining how we bounce off of each other. And where I have a Hal there, he has a Hal in personality. And those two work really well together when blended to create a good broadcast, because a good broadcast does have this incredible amount of personality, is loud and in your face and entertaining, and weaves these stories with precision. And so it's been the biggest thing about our duo that has worked, because I don't have to worry about the parts of my job that I'm not good at, because Zephyr does those amazingly. And Zephyr doesn't have to worry about the parts of his job that he is good at, but doesn't necessarily want to be sitting down and talking about all the time, because that's what I love doing. So it works out. And don't get me wrong, Zephyr's going to watch this and he's going to go, "Oh, Dia's saying I'm not good at storylines." Zephyr, you're good at storylines. Stop it. It's not what I'm talking about. Like,
It's just that at you're both at both of your bests when combined with your guys' skill set, it just works so damn well together, right? It
yeah.
feels like a complete story. It feels like a complete book, right? There's not like pages ripped out or stuff edited or anything like that. It just feels very succinct and very you know, put together.
Mhm.
Final question, because you've been so gracious with your time. What has been so far your favorite aspect, part, or memory about Pro League, or just maybe even Apex in general, right? It could just your whole expansive career as a caster or anything like that. What has been your favorite moment or favorite experience?
Getting the email,
Okay.
career-wise, biggest landmark for sure. My favorite part of Pro League is that I have been on Pro League as the Rampart meta happens, and I love Rampart. Rampart is my girl. And so it was literally this past weekend where we were watching Nocturnal from Exet just farm damage with Sheila from up on North Pad, and getting to call a Rampart oriented endgame twice in a day is incredible for me, because I'm talking about a legend that I like on a broadcast that's my dream, with players that I've been watching since forever. It would be like, to take the League of Legends example, if all of a sudden Chi 1 started running Seraphine and I was commentating. I'd be like, I was born for this. And so watching Rampart become meta at the pro level and being on the broadcast, I'm looking at it going, I was born for this. And it's been the most fulfilling part of my career so far.
Well, Dia, thank you once again for being such a gracious guest. Before I let you go, do you have any shout outs? Anybody you want to specifically thank? Could be anybody, right? You already think Steel Series is a very good sponsor, but I just kind of want to know everything else, right? Like shout outs to so and so, here, there, who, and whatnot.
Yeah, I, of course, the Apex community for always supporting my continued growth. There are a lot of people who have made what I've achieved in League of Legends possible as well. So, to everybody, of course, who has been a part of CBLOL English, a big thank you to them. I'm going to include the founders specifically, but there are many more: RMC, Axeman, 4x4, and Rudude for starting the broadcast alongside me. And Apex, there are a million people to name. Way, way, way too many. But I know that Van Sealy and Bach gave me really amazing starts, both at Nerd Street and Steel Series, respectively. And I'm not sure if they want their name out there, so I'm not going to talk about the person who reached out to me from EA, but the people who reached out to me from EA, of course, very graciously. I've been given a lot of chances by a lot of people. I've had a lot of incredible duos. Zephyr, Tiff, Vicky. I don't know. The list goes on, and I do remember each and every name as I take them, but I don't want to just sit here and talk about names for an hour. So
That's another
to
hour.
everyone, yeah, to everyone who has given me a shot or taken a second to prep out a broadcast with me and really make it the best possible, we've created something, and it's lovely to see where we are and where we'll go.
Thank you so much. And for everybody, Dia's socials, everything will be in the description box below. I will also link the ALGS Pro League stream, the schedule for you guys, so you can go check him out. I'll even
be
try
on
to
the
figure
Saturday.
out. Yeah.
Well, this Saturday time we can edit that.
Whoa. Yeah. I'll put it in the description box. Thank you so much.